Evening. The November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Blankley. Present. Mr. Blankley is here. Ms. DeFlorio. Here. Ms. DeFlorio is here. Mr. Hebert. Here. Mr. Hebert is here. Ms. Hughes Smith. Here. Ms. Hughes Smith is here. Mr. Johns. Here. Mr. Johns is here. Mr. Mafucci. Here. Mr. Mafucci is here, and Chairman McCabe.
Here.
Chairman McCabe is here.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
We do have one person to speak before the public forum this evening. You'll have 2 minutes in which to address the committee, and when the timer sounds, please conclude your remarks. Our first and only speaker is Terrence Schnurr.
Welcome, Mr. Schnurr.
Watch out for the cords. There's some cords all around. So.
Legislators, I had hoped to speak to the Agenda and Charter Committee tonight, but since they're not meeting and you're all legislators, I'm speaking to you. As we're all aware, over the last little more than a year, the county redistricting process has been a failure, wrapped in a fiasco, shrouded in a farce. I personally blame that more on individual decisions of particular individuals than on the charter. However, the process laid out in charter has encouraged and enabled such bad decisions for over half a century. I would urge this legislature to think over the next year about ways that process can be improved. I'll have specific recommendations at some point in the future, I expect, but for now, I just want to put it on your radar. Some people may think that a commission is necessary. I don't. I think commissions are often used to kick the can and pass the buck. The one good reason for a commission is to insulate decisions from personal and partisan interests. None of us in this room can confidently predict what our personal and partisan interests in the 2031 elections will be, so that shouldn't be a concern. There are other areas of the charter that need to be addressed, particularly that the charter rules and code place far too much power in the president, and that the president can use that power to gain even greater power. I think that is a much more complicated thing to deal with and is best dealt with after an election in which that's been part of the discussion, but I urge you to put that on your radar for 2024. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Schnurr. That concludes our public speakers. All right. I would like to introduce Mr. Robert Franklin, Chief Financial Officer of Monroe County, who is here to present the 2023 proposed Monroe County budget as it pertains to the Environment and Public Works Committee. We'll have a question and answer period following the presentation. Welcome, Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so you all know where you are, so I'm just going to advance to the next slide. EPW, areas of the county budget. Speak in the microphone. Areas of the county budget pertaining to the Environment and Public Works Committee include our airport, solid waste, facilities and fleet operations, and our Pure Waters Fund. Obviously, from this slide, Pure Waters is the main driver of next year's appropriations increase, but we will get to that in a moment. If I can first address our airport, our Department of Aviation. Generally speaking, airport expenses are relatively stable from year to year. Honestly, whether there are 100 flights a day or 10 flights a day, we still need to provide security, maintain firefighting capacity, and keep the runways and taxiways open to the planes. So for the most part, I'm going to say this is primarily a maintenance of effort budget. We are, however, seeing a little more cost escalation than what we've experienced in the recent past. And there's a couple items driving that. First, I'm going to mention cost for salaries and benefits. They are rising more notably for 2023, about 13% for payroll, almost 11% for benefits. And this is really the result of Monroe County trying to improve its competitiveness for employee recruitment and retention. I'll point out this impacts more than just the airport's direct appropriations. It also shows up in their interdepartmental charges. as well. For example, they receive a chargeback from our sheriff's office for the part-time deputies assigned to the airport. So you'll see payroll increases there as well, impacting chargebacks. The airport's budget for next year accounts for one additional full-time equivalent. And I'll note that the quarterly retention bonuses account for about $180,000 of the $800,000 increase in payroll. Inflationary pressures, as you might guess, are also leading to higher purchasing costs. Within our contractual services, you'll find significantly higher costs, about $747,000. That's for utilities and commercial services. And within our category of interdepartmental charges, you'll find a higher chargeback from fleet. And that's really due to the increasing price of gasoline and diesel. Offsetting, however, some of those increases is about a $900,000 reduction in debt service. Back in June, the airport used FAA pandemic funding to defease about $4.5 million of their outstanding bonds. For those of you not familiar with defeasing debt, we basically put money in an escrow account, and that escrow agent will use those funds to invest on a short term, earn some money, and then have sufficient funds to pay off the outstanding debt associated with that defeasement. Looking at our solid waste fund, like the airport, it's pretty much a maintenance of effort budget, with appropriations increasing only about $346,000 over the 22 adopted appropriations. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, about 80% of solid waste expenses are comprised of our landfill host agreements, transfer hall contracts, and our recycling contract. Those three costs amount to just over $9.5 million of the entire $11.9 million operating budget. And there are revenues coming into solid waste directly offsetting those expenses. And for those of you who are relatively new, I'm going to point out the solid waste fund had been a significant drain on county operations for quite a while. A heavy debt burden and an unsustainable subsidy of city refuse disposal drove annual operating losses ranging from $2.5 to $3.5 million a year. And it had resulted in an accumulated fund deficit of about $20 million by 2014. The director, Mike Garland, was able to assemble a number of options for improving our contractual arrangements that, when combined with a more manageable debt burden, was able to produce modest annual operating margins beginning around 2015. Those operating margins were indeed modest. It was going to take an estimated 35 years for the solid waste fund to recover from its accumulated deficit and pay back the money owed to the general fund. So in 2020, the bottom line here, we started budgeting this $2 million subsidy from the general fund. As of the end of 21, I'll point out the solid waste fund's accumulated deficit had been cut in half. And if current trends continue, we can project that this subsidy can go away in another 5 years. I'll briefly turn. Is that correct? I'll briefly turn to our engineering, facilities, and fleet. So combine these three areas of environmental services, engineering, facilities, fleet, they're increasing by about $1.7 million over 22's adopted budget. The gross appropriations are increasing much more than that, but as the costs increase, so do the chargebacks to the user departments. You can see that chargebacks on this slide are almost $3 million higher than they were in the 22 budget. That reflects the increase in gross appropriations. The two biggest increases are payroll related and utilities. So first, employee payroll and benefits are increasing by almost $2 million in next year's budget. In addition to the collectively bargained pay increases, the budget fully funds 8 FTEs that were only partially funded this year because we weren't going to hire those positions until October, a couple months ago. These are the positions that are taking over currently outsourced contracts expiring at the end of this year for managing our Iola Powerhouse and the city place mechanical and HVAC systems. Budgeted costs for utilities, since I mentioned utilities, are up about $2.2 million. That's about a 40% increase over what we budgeted in '22. Now, offsetting the impact of those two large increases are two uses of fund balance. One use of fund balance is $1 million, and we're using that out of our internal services fund. The internal services fund is where we manage all our building operations facilities. And that facility use of fund balance and facilities offsets partially some of those increases. We're also using $200,000 of our general fund so that we can begin implementing some of the recommendations in the Climate Action Plan Phase 1. Okay, now I'll look at our Pure Waters Fund. We're budgeting a pretty big increase, $6.6 million. It's a big jump. And I'm just going to say if there's any silver lining to this increase, it's that total appropriations are still below the $84.6 million they were back in 2019, just a couple years ago. I do think this increase might be short-lived, hopefully, as the increase is related to several specific operating costs, which I believe will settle back down within the next year or so. Now, of this $6.6 million, half the budgeted increase is due to higher costs, about $3.7 million, of chemicals and biologicals used at our 2 water treatment plants. Another quarter of the increase is due to higher utility costs. That's about $1.7 million higher. And also contributing is a higher cost of gasoline and diesel fuel. Those are combined about $457,000. We have employee retention bonuses of another $350,000, and of course, the associated fringe benefits. Fringe benefits are increasing about $748,000. Now, just a quick comment, organizationally, Pure Waters is where the county is creating its environmental quality office. In addition to the existing industrial waste pretreatment coordinator, DES is creating 3 new budgeted positions: a stormwater management coordinator, an environmental compliance coordinator, and a sustainability coordinator. Governments can be pretty siloed, as you know. So the expectation is that this team of environmental quality managers will work under the direction of the deputy director to blur some of those organizational lines and more holistically plan, implement, and manage the climate action recommendations and continually improve our approach to managing sustainable county operations. Now, to avoid an even higher budgeted increase in Pure Waters, they did reduce their headcounts by about 6.5 FTEs. And they did agree to a 12% vacancy factor to their positions. Now, 12% is definitely on the high side, but it also is reflective of the current employee turnover we are experiencing and the recent difficulty we've had in hiring new staff. Pure Water's fund balance of $6.2 million is being used to ease the burden on our ratepayers. But in this budget, we are requesting a rate increase. Each district, 6%. The impact of that on the average household, and we define an average household as one that consumes 60,000 gallons of water each year. The impact is about $7 and $15, depending on which district you live in. On what district you live in. It's about a $7 impact if you're in the northwest quadrant or Irondequoit Bay, South Central. It's about a $15 impact if you're in my district, GCO, and the Rochester district. Mr. Chairman, that really concludes the presentation. Happy to get back to the table and entertain questions.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I will now open the floor to committee members who have questions regarding the budget. Mr. Johns.
To the budget director, could you provide?
Legislator
the
Johns, can you just speak into the mic,
Oh,
please?
thank you. sorry. Yeah, through the chair to the budget director. Could you break down all the positions that fall under the portion of the 23 budget that are authorized, funded, but are left vacant?
Mr. Chairman, for as long as I can remember, the Budget Office has resisted providing such management reports to the committees. They represent single point in time information that changes, quite frankly, on a daily basis. As a result of that, those reports are effectively obsolete as they come off the printer. For that reason, we have not provided such management reports in the past.
Okay. Through the chair, what percentage of the aviation department is mandated versus non-mandated?
Mr. Chairman, we've, over the past several years, de-emphasized our mandated and non-mandated costs in this particular book. We did not run department-specific calculations, so we will have to look into that and get back to the committee in writing.
Okay, and through the chair, what is the breakdown of the aviation budget as it relates to appropriations charged to the general fund, airport fund, debt service fund, and capital projects fund?
Mr. Chairman, as an enterprise fund of the county, the aviation department is entirely managed within an aviation fund. Enterprise funds account for their own debt service and capital projects. So as you look in this book, all appropriations and revenues will be accounted for within the aviation fund.
Okay, and through the chair again, you list implementations and construction of projects under the Upstate Airports Economic Development and Revitalization Grant. Can you explain in more detail what that means?
Through the chair to the legislator, are you referring to the 2023 objectives?
Yes.
Okay. Back in September of 2021, the airport submitted an application to the State of New York Department of Transportation, which was a transportation infrastructure grant competition by the State of New York, where 23 airports qualified, and ultimately 9 airports were selected for up to $40 million. The airport put in an application. We received $18 million of state funding. Those projects that we submitted really fall under 3 different categories, or there's 3 different elements of those projects. There's amenities to passengers, there's what I call behind the walls or infrastructure, and then safety and security. So within those 3 elements, there's really 10 different projects or sub-projects to improve the airport. And so some of those have been widely talked about, such as the Frederick Douglass Legacy area in the observatory. As you know, this body approved the renaming of the airport back in 2021, Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport. So we wanted to celebrate and honor the gentleman who's the airport's been named after. And we have a committee that was approved by this legislative body to go and to look at how we can put out education material, put out artifacts, memorabilia, to honor his legacy, and that's what we're looking to do in that area. We also are looking to improve and refresh the veterans area of the airport. Currently, the veterans area has not been updated in about 20 years. And so under the direction of the county executive, we've met with just about every single veterans group in Monroe County, along with a couple meetings with the Military Historical Museum down on Anderson Avenue to get some ideas on what the veterans would like to see in this new renovated veterans area. So that will be a big project that will certainly be a great amenity to the airport. We're expanding the canopy capabilities, covering passengers coming and going to the airport in two different areas. One area is going out to the short-term parking lot. The other area is going between the current canopy and the garage where the car rentals are. This was at the request of all 6 car rentals at the airport. It was not included in the original airport application back in 2016, the first round of the state grant. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity to do that. Another element that we're looking at doing here to improve the airport is a parking guidance system in our garage. As many of you know, that is probably the most stressful aspect of arriving at the airport, is trying to find a parking spot in the garage. This parking guidance system is starting to grow, not only at airports across the country, but at large facilities such as amusement parks and stadiums and auditoriums and so forth. It's typically the red light, green light, and it just directs you to where there's an open parking spot. So that will be a welcome addition to the airport. In the arrivals level of the airport, the lower level, we're looking to completely refresh that. Right now, it's kind of dark, sterile. It's dank. It's kind of depressing, to be honest with you. We want to give that a little bit more vitality and kind of make that look like the other areas of the airport, such as the upper departure level and certainly in the food court and concourse area. Some of the behind the walls things that we may be looking at or we are planning on doing certainly is improving our fire detection system throughout the terminal building. That's another older system, a little over 20 years old. It works, so we're not concerned about safety, but it's outdated compared to current technologies. We've got an opportunity to completely overhaul that, and so we're going to take advantage of that with the state funding. The other area is the baggage makeup area. That's in the secured area of the airport where your luggage goes. Again, that's over 20 years old. We've got bag belts, motors, other equipment in there. I'm just drawing a blank on some of the other things there that constantly are in need of repair. And this gives us an opportunity to update that. We're looking at doing some hearing loop applications in the TSA checkpoint. We weren't able to do that back in 2016, but now we've got an opportunity to do that too. As you know, Rochester is the home of the National Technical Institute of the Deaf, the largest deaf and hard of hearing college in the entire world. And we see the passengers coming and going through the airport every single day. We need to put hearing loops in the TSA checkpoint. TSA is supportive of that, and so we're going to be including that as a part of the project. We're going to do some improvements to the firehouse, again, sorely needed. HVAC upgrades, window upgrades, door upgrades, and some foundation work at the firehouse. We're going to look at redoing our mobile application that we have currently. Again, technology in this application changes all the time. I feel we have outdated technology. And then moving forward, we'll be able to add certain elements to improve the passenger experience, such as ordering food ahead of time. I call it the Panera effect, that you could order food on your way to the airport or from home, go through the TSA checkpoint, go to one of our concessionaires and pick up your order there. So I've kind of been a little bit long-winded. I'm sure I missed a few elements there. Certainly in the lower area, we are working with Visit Rochester on a new Visit Rochester kiosk location. So we've partnered with them in this effort. So ultimately, at the end of the day, between the 3 different elements of passenger amenities, behind the walls infrastructure, and then safety and security, the object and the goal is to make the airport better tomorrow than it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, the director's a smart guy. He's pretty much answered every question that I could come up with, but I have 2 more here. The department budget, personal services, what caused them to go up by $800,000 a year? If my understanding is TSA is covered by the federal government, then in the 23 budget, the annual amount of $4.7 million, was that mostly charged back to the county sheriff's office?
Sure, through the chair, the increase in expenses under personnel, as Finance Director Franklin kind of mentioned, it has to do with a couple different elements. One would be certainly the retention bonus that the county executive initiated back in 2022. I believe four payments of that will be in the 2023 budget. I believe the increase in the agreement with CSEA is also a part of that, along with the increase in the new agreement with our airport firefighters union. So I believe that covers the expenses for personnel that would cause the increase. Sorry. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just asked the tag team on this answer. Some of the variations you're going to see throughout this book between the 22 amended budget and the 23 proposed, some of that variance is going to be attributable to the fact that in the third quarter of this year, we brought a referral for a reappropriation. There are a number of departments that had varying levels of difficulty in recruiting and retaining staff, and therefore vacancies drove some savings in this particular lines. Those savings were used to fund retention bonuses in other departments that did not have the same level of difficulty recruiting and retaining staff.
Through the chair, thank you. Those are good points. I just had one last question here. The airport field operations are up about 1.15 million this year. Is that attributable mostly to increase in salaries and fuel costs, or would that be mostly what I surmise that is what it's from?
Mr. Chairman, an overwhelming portion of the increase is attributable to the salaries, benefits, and retention pay. However, I will also comment, there's a $127,000 increase from the chargeback and fleet maintenance. A lot of that is for the fleet facility itself and diesel and gasoline. And then, of course, a smaller increase, about 85 grand in overall utilities.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, both directors of finance and the airport, and I have no further questions.
Thank you, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, the administration, I would like to refer back to Legislator John's first question about a breakdown of all positions. I actually submitted a FOIA this afternoon in anticipation of being told no. I will note that one of the citizens in this county put a FOIA request in a couple months ago and got detailed information at the level they requested for a number of positions and things like that. So I'd like to request that if possible, you respond to this FOIA at least a few days before we vote on the budget on December 13th. Just FYI, no response needed unless you care to.
Mr. Chairman, if a FOIL is submitted to our FOIL officer in communications, I'm sure they will address that. That response did not come from the budget office. I'll guarantee that.
Interesting. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe it's unlikely, but does the 2023 proposed budget allocate any cash capital for aviation department projects?
No, Mr. Chairman. There really is no true local share to airport capital projects. FAA in New York State fund an overwhelming proportion of their capital projects, and what small local share may remain is reimbursed to the county by the airport authority in their generated revenues.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration. During your presentation, Mr. Franklin, you indicated that there was $200,000, at least that's what I heard, $200,000 for the Climate Action Plan Phase 1. Do you have details on what that money is being used for specifically?
Mr. Chairman, unless Director Garland corrects me, I'm going to answer that question as no. Tonight, we don't have a plan for that $200,000, but it is related to what we may believe are costs associated with beginning to implement the Phase 1 recommendations.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, just as a way of explaining, when I read the referral that this legislative body passed a short time ago, it did not read to me that there were expenses associated with the actions that were going to be taken, aside from perhaps some paper posters on a wall and things like that. And thus the question. So if there's any way to get any details on what's being considered, I would appreciate that. Also, through you, Mr. Chairman, during your presentation, Mr. Franklin, you mentioned that there were increases in fuel and chemicals and all the things that we would all expect. Could you just summarize for us how you arrived at those amounts? You said 40% for one, for example. How do you know that's, I mean, I realize that this is a wonderful guessing game, but could you just give us some details on how you got there?
Mr. Chairman, there's a lot in this budget book that is a fun guessing game, but we are already experiencing vendor price increases. Most of our, take that back, I don't know what percent, but there are a certain percentage of our vendor contracts across the county that don't follow the calendar year. They're either a purchase as a point in time, or their contracts for some other fiscal year other than the county's calendar year, and we are already seeing significant price increases. The most largest increase in our treatment plants is for sodium hypochlorite bleach, about a 40% increase.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I do believe this body has also seen, through you, Mr. Chair, I do believe this body has seen increases over the last many months of things along the way where something was priced 2 years ago and suddenly it's up 30%, whatever. So I wish you good luck. I hope you are a wonderful wizard on your guesses. Otherwise, I think we face a lot more of those types of referrals. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, could you give any more information about the 3 new positions being put in place for the capital? I'm sorry, for the CAP, the CAP project, what they're going to do, because I think so far we've only approved phase 1. Is there an assumption that a phase 2 is going to be approved, et cetera?
Before I turn the mic over, Mr. Chairman, to Director Garland, I will comment that I appreciate the estimations that go behind and assumptions that are put into this budget book. I joke tongue in cheek that it's a guessing game. It is an educated endeavor. And I will point out that Monroe County has been incredibly successful and has demonstrated its budgetary flexibility in coming to this body seeking reappropriations like we did in the third quarter this year to reevaluate where the spending was actually occurring. So we've demonstrated success during COVID, some demonstrated success during this year's inflationary crisis, and I am absolutely confident we will demonstrate success should the need arise in '23. And with that, I would turn this over.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, the Environmental Quality Office is really fundamentally an evolution of the industrial waste control section, which lived within Pure Waters. Its primary responsibility was managing and regulating industrial waste that went into our collection system. And that section has evolved, as you know, over time to take on responsibilities with stormwater, household hazardous waste, pharmaceuticals, the eco park. So this is really an opportunity to realign duties that exist within the industrial waste section and develop its mission in a more unified manner, a more integrated manner, and then include the sustainability coordinator, which is really fundamentally a new position. The other 3 titles are really upgrades to existing positions because the titles haven't really they haven't evolved over time to match the duties that they've taken on. We've had increased regulatory requirements, both at Van Laer as well as with our chemical and bulk storage. Again, with our expansion of services offered at the Eco Park, our mercury abatement program. This group does great work, and their mission is very aligned between pretreatment, the stormwater management, sustainability, which is primarily climate action, as well as our other regulatory responsibilities around Van Laer, as well as Eco Park.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, did I misunderstand then? I thought these three positions were being created from scratch for specifically easing the problems between, interdepartmental issues and, that exist in every organization, directly related to the climate action plan and only related to the climate action plan. So it sounds like I misunderstood that.
Well, the environmental compliance coordinator is an evolution, if you will, from the engineer Pure Waters title that we have right now, which again, its duties on paper don't reflect what requirements and responsibilities we have. So we felt it was appropriate then to abolish that title, but then create the environmental compliance coordinator to reflect the duties and responsibilities that we have now, as well as the additional regulatory requirements that we have to meet. The stormwater management coordinator, those duties, if you will, were being performed by an industrial waste engineer. Again, the responsibilities have evolved, they've increased, as well as the regulatory requirements for stormwater, as well as managing the Monroe County Stormwater Coalition. So the old title didn't reflect the duties that were being performed and the obligations that we had within the department. So we felt a stormwater management coordinator was a better title with increased duties. And the only position that is really fundamentally new in the sense that it didn't evolve from a prior responsibility is a sustainability coordinator. That's a new task aligned with the climate action plan. We also have the industrial waste pretreatment coordinator. That's an existing position that has not changed. But of the four titles I've talked about, they will work very, very closely together within the Environmental Quality Office and report to Deputy Director Clement Chung. Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to tag team on this answer because in my presentation, I talked about how siloed the county can be and wanting this team of environmental managers to blur organizational lines. I'll elaborate on what I meant by that. It is very typical in any government, certainly Monroe County included, that if you work in the solid waste division, you are focused solely on what goes on in solid waste, and you don't really care what happens in parks. But I'm going to tell you, our parks golf courses have, over the course of time, a number of drainage and irrigation issues. Durand, Eastman Park, and our Durand Golf Course, about 4 years ago, underwent some drainage water flow redirection. That happened in a vacuum within the Parks Department. It cannot happen going forward. They have to communicate and discuss with stormwater management coordinators for environmental issues going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. And in my experience, through you, Mr. Chairman, it doesn't matter if you're in government, or if you're in the Navy, or if you're in a big corporation like IBM, which I experienced all three now. Those boundaries become pretty hard and fast regardless of what organization you're in. So I fully appreciate what you're saying. One last question on this topic. Through you, Mr. Chairman, can you tell me if these are new hired positions or are they people transitioning from an existing position to these newly titled positions?
Mr. Chairman, the sustainability coordinator will be the one position that we'll be seeking a new person for. Those positions are all competitive, and for the sustainability coordinator, there will be required a test.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Through the chair, on page 72 of the budget book, there's an objective, and this is on the airport, continuing aggressive air service initiatives for more flights at ROC. Can you elaborate on the efforts and plans for more flights at the airport?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. My answer will take about an hour because I love talking about air service, but I'll shorten that down to just a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate if you do, and I'm sure the chairman would as well.
We have maintained a very aggressive, proactive air service development posture at the airport over the last numerous years, particularly during COVID time period in 2020, 2021, moving into 2022. And we've had some very good successes with this aggressive posture. Frontier Airlines came in 2021. So our Spirit Airlines came in recently in 2022, offering large body aircraft, A320 737s, which is nice to have at airports this size. And that has to do with just getting out and talking to the airlines. And this is something that we plan on doing moving forward. And you have to remember that you're not the only airport that believes their airport is deserving of air service. I'm competing with over 320 commercial service airports, everybody wanting to meet with the airlines. But I'm not only competing with airports in other geographical areas, I'm honestly competing with airports such as Buffalo and Syracuse, an hour in each direction. So it's a very competitive environment that we operate in. As we know, to the north of us, we have Lake Ontario and fish don't fly. So we're very limited right there. Whereas Buffalo enjoys a lot of the Canadian traffic. And so when you go and you talk to the airlines, you have to sell this community, and certainly working with the County Department of Planning and Economic Development, under County Executive Adam Bello, we've started really good relationships with the Chamber of Commerce. And these are things that airlines want you to be talking about. They want to know what's going on in your economic environment, business growth, population growth, and so forth. So all of that comes into packaging, and then you go out and you sell it. The other element that's very important when we go and talk to the airlines is what are their costs at operating out of this airport? And so there's a universal metric called cost per enplanement, or CPE. And that's something that we try to keep, the airport tries to keep as low as possible. Because again, you're comparing yourself to other airports across the country. And so I'm proud to say that the Rochester Airport CPE is very low compared to other size airports. We're lower than Buffalo, we're lower than Syracuse, and that puts me in a really good spot to go and try to sell these airlines, not only new airlines coming in, such as a Spirit and a Frontier, but also existing incumbent airlines such as Southwest, United, Delta, JetBlue, and American, and even Allegiant, to look at different routes. And so those are just a couple different elements that we look at when we go talk to the airlines. And then probably another element that I think is worth noting moving forward is realistic expectations. And this is something that can be very difficult to talk about because everybody wants to know why we don't have a flight here or have a flight there. But I can't go to an airline and try to sell an unrealistic expectation that doesn't match up with their business model. That's not a good position for us to be in. It also invites you to never be asked to come back to that airline again because you just wasted their time. And so realistic expectations is an important part of developing that relationship so that when I make a phone call to Southwest or to Spirit or Frontier or any of our 8 airlines that operate out of this airport, they know that you're being honest with them with your data, you're sharing with them information that they maybe already don't know, and that your integrity in these conversations is very real, and that what you're providing them is something that they should consider versus the opposite of going to the airline and having them look at you across the table and just shake their heads like they'll never do this route or they'll never fly out of your airport for different reasons. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I do felt that it was important to at least list some of the things that we think about moving forward in trying to attract new airlines to Rochester or trying to attract existing airlines to expand their networks within Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Very good detailed question, and I appreciate the detail you provided. One last question for me before I turn the floor over to my fellow legislators. As a follow-up, when do you see employment numbers, departing passengers reaching pre-pandemic levels?
Through the chair, COVID-19 back in 2020 was absolutely devastating to airports and aviation across the country. Here in Rochester, at one point in April of 2020, we were down almost 98% in passengers. Believe it or not, our worst day was 9 departing flights and 185 total passengers, when typically we would have 50 to 52 departing flights and 4,000 departing passengers, or 8,000 total passengers. So we're in a much different spot today. Just today, we took a look at our Thanksgiving travel numbers for 2022. That's Sunday before Thanksgiving to Sunday after Thanksgiving. And we had roughly 33,000 passengers come through this airport. That's the best we've had in the last 5 years, even pre-pandemic, which is a really good story moving forward. With airfare being relatively high, and given inflation, people are still flying, and those numbers reflected that we're moving in the right direction. I believe that at the end of this year, we will be about 10% below where we were in total passengers coming through this airport, or I should say departing passengers through this airport. And in fact, in October of this year, we already exceeded our total passenger numbers that we enjoyed back in 2021. So we are definitely trending in the right direction. I think it's going to be maybe sometime in 23 and early part of 24 where we get back to our pre-pandemic levels, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. And that's really a result of the leisure vacation traveler and also the business traveler returning to aviation.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. And through you, Mr. Chairman, just want to thank Mr. Garland, Mr. Franklin, Mr. Moore. I do believe we're lucky to have all three of you gentlemen on our side, so to speak. And for now, I'll yield the floor. I do probably have some more questions later.
Legislator DeFlorio.
Thank you. So I had to laugh when Legislator Hebert asked that question because my answer was this morning because my husband was dropping my daughter. Departing passengers, so it was
Legislator
quite busy
DeFlorio,
this morning.
can you use the mic?
Yes, so sorry about that. Anyways, my question to Mr. Moore through the chair, in terms of personnel, it looked like there was some perhaps either title changes or positions that shifted. So it looks like perhaps there's a new title of Assistant Airport Technical Coordinator. Is that a new position in next year's budget?
Through the chair, that is correct. It's basically the airport security coordinator. It's an assistant airport security coordinator position that we created due to conversations with the Transportation Security Agency and the demands that they were putting on the airport. We felt it was necessary to have an assistant or a backup airport security coordinator, which they were lobbying for us to do, and we went ahead and did that.
Thank you. And then through the chair, it looks like 19 airport equipment operator positions perhaps are gone and 15 motor equipment operator positions. I'm sorry, did I say that wrong? Yeah, sorry. The airport equipment are new and the motor equipment positions seem to have been eliminated. Is that a retitle or are they completely different positions?
Through the chair, that is a retitle of those positions. They are not newly created positions.
Okay. So there are now 19 and there were 15. So are there some new positions but retitled?
Originally, there were motor equipment operators and senior motor equipment operators.
I missed that.
In negotiation with CSEA, we moved them into the category of all being airport equipment operators. So that's why you see the 15 move to the 19.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving over to environmental services, through the chair, you were talking about the climate action plan, and it looks like in terms of major objectives for next year is the phase 2 of climate action. Do you have any specific plans at this point for phase 2?
No, we don't have specific plans. Phase 2 is in development now, and obviously will come back before your honorable body for approval, and we expect that at the end of towards the end of next year.
Thank you. And then, I mean, I could itemize, but I'm perhaps thinking through the chair that this might be a general question for you. It looks like a number of the capital project budgets decreased year over year, so I'm not sure if that's a general answer or if you want specific pages.
No, Mr. Chairman, we had quite the conversation between the Budget Office and DES about this. In my presentation, mentioned the significant appropriation increase. It was about 6.6 million. You have to pay for that somehow. So to try and limit some of the increase in appropriations, we took a hard look at our capital projects and most specifically looked at the current available funding within cash-funded projects that had been funded in prior years, and working with the director and his team, identified several of their cash-funded capital projects which had sufficient funding available that we could slightly reduce the 23 budget request.
I guess in a follow-up question then to that is that realistic based on the fact that a lot of project costs are also increasing at this time?
Fair question, Mr. Chairman. The short answer is yes, and I'm going to say that because I believe this is a short-term reduction in the cash funding of projects. I see for the 24 budget, those specific general collection projects that are cash funded going right back to where they were in the 22 budget.
Thank you. And through the chair, on page 582, the budget for salaries and engineering administration, looks like there was a significant increase there. Is that due to the new titles that were mentioned, or is that something else driving that?
Mr. Chairman, on this particular page, page 582, the first generic answer is we have higher pay and step increases per our collective bargaining agreements. I'm also going to point out there were 2 positions transferred into engineering from our Pure Waters division. It was a junior engineer and a project manager. My last comment I'm going to make about this increase is on the 22 amended budget. We did employ in the engineering division a vacancy factor on these salaries. Off the top of my head, I don't know to what extent we would have included a reduction on that third quarter reappropriation this year for savings due to vacancies.
Thank you. And through the chair on page 586, there's a significant rise in overtime, but only 11,000 in salaries.
Yes, another fair question, Mr. Chairman. Again, in addition to the routine collective bargaining pay and step increases, within our Pure Waters division across the various cost centers, we did employ a 12% vacancy factor on their positions. That certainly keeps down the increase in budgeted salaries that are being requested.
So yeah, I guess a follow-up question through the chair to that then is, so, and I believe you had mentioned that there was a reduction in positions. So we're reducing the number of staff, but then we're paying out 100,000 potentially in overtime. Does that fiscally sound?
Mr. Chairman, that is just a reflection of where we stand in today's environment for recruiting and retaining our staff. We do have vacancies here, and And we do have difficulty in hiring staff, so unfortunately, the burden on a day-to-day basis falls to the staff here, and that takes usually the form of overtime.
I guess a follow-up question then to that, and I'm not sure if this is a question for Mr. Garland. Are we doing anything to change up recruitment efforts or looking at any changes to try and fill some of these positions?
That's a great question. I'm gonna let the director tag team, but I want to tell you something that from a governance perspective, that's the question. And I'm happy to share that, yes, we have, some departments are going off on their own in creating positions for, pick the title, staffing specialist, recruiter. We have them in Human Services, Monroe Community Hospital. Our Human Resources Department in '22 created a recruiter position. And I've had personal, as a department head, I've had personal experience working with her on recruiting, and she's doing a fabulous job. And what do I mean by that? I don't just mean getting people to take a civil service test. I mean, she's having actual conversations with candidates and making sure they understand from a civil service perspective, what are the catchphrases and buzzwords they need to include on their civil service employment application. And when they don't get hired for that job, having follow-up conversations to say, you need to also apply for these 3 other available positions because you meet the qualifications and have the relevant experience. So she's doing a fabulous job. I don't know if, Mike, you want to tag team?
Thank you for that. It's awesome to know.
And through Mr. Chairman, I echo what Director Franklin said. Donnell Webster, the recruiter that's been hired by HR, is doing truly an outstanding job getting out in the field, engaging with our existing employees to learn about the job, how, and what the requirements are and ways that she can be effective in bringing people into DES at all levels. And that's where, we want interest at all levels. I've been pleased with the progress we've made within the department, bringing talent into the organization, but we have to be vigilant. We have to continue. We have the staff, they're eager, they're willing to be trained, they're willing to learn the job and see the county as a career. And so there's more work to be done. But again, pleased with the progress, but I think Donnell will be a great addition to continuing that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to yield the floor at this point and then come back perhaps. Thank you.
Mr. Hugh Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, could you just clarify on the new sustainability coordinator if they will also have responsibilities related to the active transportation plan or the comprehensive plan currently under development as well?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the sustainability coordinator, as envisioned, will be working across the county on the projects, programs, and initiatives identified in the climate action plan. So if it takes that individual to DOT regarding projects that have been identified, or the airport or parks, that person will be responsible to do so. As it relates to the comprehensive plan, obviously they're closely aligned plans, so I expect that coordinator will be working very closely with planning because sustainability is a key component of the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. And then related to the 200,000 that was referenced earlier, the Climate Action Plan Phase 1 that this body passed has some 60 items listed within that plan, most of which would facilitate cost savings to this county over time. Was that an accurate assessment?
Through Mr. Chairman, those would have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, the programs, projects, and initiatives I mentioned, and really look at them through a triple bottom line approach, both in terms of environmental benefit, economic, and social benefit. But in some cases, we certainly hope that the savings are a driving factor.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. I yield the floor.
Legislator Blankley.
Question through you to the administration. Mr. Franklin, in your presentation, when you were speaking about the airport, you mentioned payroll increases of about 13% and benefits increases of about 11% year over year. It just wasn't clear to me if those numbers were specific to the airport or if they were across the entire county of Monroe.
Mr. Chairman, those particular percentages were specific to the airport itself, not reflective of any other department in the county.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question then. What are those percentages countywide?
I actually know that answer. I have to dig it out.
Take your time.
And by the way, when I make my presentations and I say, 10% or $1 million more, I always compare to the adopted budget. This book by charter requires me to compare to the amended budget. My experience shows me legislators better understand the adopted budget. So that's the basis of my commentary. Across the county, all the commitment items are related to personnel services, salaries, overtime, temporary help, longevity, are about 11.4% higher over what we adopted in '22. It's an increase of about $31.4 million. I don't have the percentage for fringe benefits, though. Sorry about that.
Hey, Mr. Franklin, if you could just provide that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Other questions? Legislator DeFlorio.
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 588, environmental services, the cost for City Place looks like has gone down approximately $30,000. And then there was a kind of a significant change between the amended 2022 amended budget versus the initial budget. I'm just wondering what drove that cost as well, or that change.
Mr. Chairman, a couple comments. City Place, what is in our building accounts, right? And on page 588, the cost accumulating within the building account to manage all the costs of having that building across the street. This represents the charges back to Pure Waters. A lot of that is driven by the staff assigned to Pure Waters in the square foot of office space that they occupy. Most building costs, shared costs, are blown out to all the residing departments based on a ratio of square footage. Regarding the shift between the 22 amended budget and the 23 request, a lot of that may very well have to do with our third quarter reappropriations. We kind of debated about this in the budget office. We were going to first take the easy way out on that third quarter reappropriation, but then we decided to go, the full 9 yards, and we blew out all those direct costs to all the residing departments through our building chargeback. So it's all really just math driven.
Thank you. And then through the chair on that same page, the interdepartmental purchasing line item looks like it dropped from 2022 to 2023 by about 63,000. Wondering what is driving that.
Mr. Chairman, this is all driven from the county's, we call it ICAP, Indirect Cost Allocation Plan. It's a plan prescribed by federal IRS for allocating general overhead costs across the county. When it comes to purchasing, most of their ICAP charges are spread to the other departments based on a prorated ratio of purchase orders that they generate, contracts that they generate, price agreements that they generate. So this is all pursuant to a plan.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the administration. For this department, how much did their fund balance increase from 12/31/21 to now? Or how much do you anticipate it increasing between the end of last year and the end of this year? Either, any dates work.
Mr. Chairman, is the question, how much did the fund balance change between 12/31/21 and today?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we actually don't evaluate that until we prepare our financial statements. We try to keep our eye on the ball on how departments and individual funds are doing through the year. And right now, Pure Waters as a fund is still projected to have sufficient fund balance at the end of calendar year 22 to fund the requested fund balance being appropriated in the 23 budget. And they would actually have that as of the 12/31/21 financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but do you have any idea of the delta? Did it go up? Did it go down? About the same? I mean, and again, I'm not going to hold you to this. I'm just looking for ballpark estimates.
As Mr. Chairman, as a fund, Pure Waters tends to have small operating margins, positive margins. That, of course, could vary from district to district, but I don't have that evaluation in front of me tonight.
Would that, through you, Mr. Chair, would that be a big job to be able to produce?
Chairman, I don't like to say it's a big job. I'm going to tell you, when I'm fielding 1,000 budget questions, it's a big job at budget time. The director and I meet every June, July to go over the financial statements, operating results, operating margins, and fund balance for each district, and talk about strategies for better managing that.
Well, as you indicated through the chair, Mr. Franklin, I have a whole lot more questions, but we'll see if we can't find another way to get them answered. I yield the floor.
Legislator Johns.
Yeah, through the chair to the budget director. I just heard you say a few minutes ago it was about 31.5 million extra with negotiated contracts, retention, bonuses, keeping people around. So the budget is up 63 million. 31.5 is about half of that would be contributed to that increase in salary, pension, and the other cost, personnel cost, right?
That 31 million was payroll related, salaries, overtime, temporary help. I didn't have the figure for benefits, but I can get the fringe benefits. But yes, the salary overtime, it's roughly half of the overall increase.
Half of the increase. And just as another, large scale point, how much extra are we bringing in sales tax this year?
A little over 18 million, about 18.5 million, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and through the chairman to the budget director, how much extra are we bringing in property taxes over last year?
Roughly 5 million, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and so using rough figures, we are probably 10 to 15 million short that we are taking out of the fund balance then. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, the other revenues are up and down all across the county. Minor increase in our hotel tax revenue. State and federal aid is roughly the same as last year. Revenue from fees and charges is roughly the same at $125 million. Other revenue, what I categorize as other revenues, are expected to increase 10 million, 10.7 million to 325.9. We are using fund balance, Mr. Chairman, across the county and all our funds. It's about $22.7 million of fund balance, 5.4 million to offset an increase in the tax levy, 1.7 to fund some of the anti-violence efforts in our office for the sheriff. We've already talked about $200,000 to begin implementing some of the recommendations of the Climate Action Plan. I believe I commented Pure Waters is using 6.2 million of their fund balance to support their operations. We are using $6.1 million from our debt service fund to fully redeem a bond anticipation note next year. And we're using $3.1 million from the reserve for bonded debt as statutory required for debt service.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you to the Budget Director. Thank you.
Legislator Hebert.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot one, I think, fairly important question. On page 699, there's a projection that revenue for recyclable sales would if I read it correctly, more than triples. Could you please explain that? I thought the world was having major recyclable issues as far as aftermarkets.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, again, these are recyclable materials, primarily metals that are coming out from projects that we're self-performing, or they're materials that are made available to the county from contractors working on projects. We're looking at historical trends and the value of the metals and we adjusted our estimate accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Through you, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up quickly. So this is not talking about the materials that are recycled at the garage, at the driveway basement that you're talking about. These are other things?
Yes, through Mr. Chairman. These are materials that are generated from work that's being performed by Pure Waters crews, mechanics, and electricians that have value that we can recycle. Really from construction and maintenance projects, Mr. Chairman.
And a related follow-up, are we losing or making money on recyclables when you take into account the cost of running the operation? Yes, I know we outsource it to waste management, et cetera, et cetera.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the short answer is yes. We're really protected from the volatility in the recycling marketplace, and the county earns from the residential curbside recycling program $6.50 per ton processed, and it's roughly close to 50,000 tons processed per year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the floor.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Franklin and your team for answering my committee's questions. I appreciate that. Moving on to the approval of the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. You have the October 25th, 2022 minutes of the Environment and Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. Next item on the agenda is new business.
Referral 22-0372, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at 471 Hamlin Center Road in the town of Hamlin.
Moved by Legislator John, seconded by Legislator DeFlorio. Is there any quick discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0374, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for Webster Park improvements.
Moved by Legislator Johns, seconded by Legislator DeFlorio. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0375, amend the 2022-2027 capital improvement program and the 2022 capital budget to add a project entitled Webster Park Improvements, authorize financing for the project, and authorize a contract with the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York.
Moved by Legislator John, seconded by Legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0376, authorize a contract with Schuler Haas Electric for construction services for the Rochester Pure Waters District District's Frank E. Van Laer Water Resource Recovery Facility Secondary Clarifier Improvements Project Phase 2.
Moved by legislator DeFlorio, second by legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion on this? Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the administration, what were the findings of the Phase 1 tests that are referenced in the referral on one clarifier that justify moving to Phase 2?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm as excited about this project as Director Moore is about the airport. And
I doubt it.
as you may know from your tours at the plant, these reference the 6 clarifiers at the towards the end of the process. And as you know, through your honorable body, we're able to advance a test clarifier because these are very specific components to be able to achieve proper settling of sludge or biosolids. And it's a combination of hydraulics and mechanical systems that control that. So what we learned in phase 1, the test clarifiers, how to properly configure the weirs where the water is flowing over, how we remove the biosolids from the bottom of the clarifier tanks, but how to really get the blanket of sludge to settle properly so that we can remain compliant and maximize the flexibility for operators, but also the consistency of the flow within the tank. So it's really a project of hydraulics in managing that biomass within the tank, because as you know from what you've seen is that what goes over those weirs is effectively what's going out to Lake Ontario after it's disinfected. But this is a very critical part of our process to settle the biomass within the system itself.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think to net your answer, it is you were satisfied with the biomass removal that came out of the one test clarifier.
Yes, we learned through Mr. Chairman, we learned enough from that tank to be able to standardize a design going forward. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman, then will the phase 1 test clarifier be modified as a result of those findings to make it consistent with the other 5?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, there's a component of this project that will allow us to go back and modify the test clarifier so that all 6 tanks are consistent, will operate in a similar manner, achieve the same flexibility and performance.
Thank you. And last question through you, Mr. Chairman, a Karnak question for you, Mr. Garland. And I think I probably just left some of the younger people completely in the dark. Karnak was a TV guy a long time ago that played by Johnny Carson. What's the expected lifespan of this improvement?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the current clarifiers have been operating for almost 50 years. I would expect we could see these current systems operate for another 50 years. My guess is it will be somewhere within the 30, 40-year time frame that they'll be replaced.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0378, authorize a contract with Fluent Consulting Corporation for the provision of energy aggregation group management services.
Moved by legislator Hebert. Seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this? Legislator Hebert.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, Mr. Chairman, who submitted bids besides the state?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Fluent Consulting Corporation was the only respondent.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, does this contract oversee all of the entities defined at the end of the second paragraph, or just those 600 entities associated with Monroe County?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, they manage all of the accounts for the county as well as those organizations listed in the referral.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, have we opened this Municipal Energy Aggregation Group to other potential participants anytime recently?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it is open really at any time for a municipality who is interested. We, over the past 20 years, have reached out and made municipalities aware of this program, and there really is no restriction on municipalities within Monroe County joining the aggregation group. They'd be welcome to join.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Follow-up question. How would they know this program existed if we're not reaching out to them periodically?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we had been reaching out to other municipalities, and many of which have said they're happy with their energy procurement. But it is certainly an opportunity for us to reach out and continue to get the word out about our aggregation group.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I would request that you consider doing so, given the increasing cost of energy for all, and the higher we can drive this volume, the better it is for all. I yield the floor.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0379, increase and improvement of facilities in the Northwest Quadrant Pure Waters District, general pump station, interceptor, and treatment plant improvements, and authorize an interfund transfer.
Moved by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this? Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the administration, could you just take a moment to describe what communication and data transmission systems provide and why they need upgrades?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, our water resource recovery facility, Northwest Quadrant, as well as the pump stations, obviously rely on communication and remote operations. So we are continually evaluating and identifying opportunities for improvement for enhanced communication, really for all elements within the water resource recovery process, but also the performance of our pump stations. But that's an example of the work that we do generally under this capital fund. I know we're looking to do work within the water resource recovery facility for thickener evaluation, heating and ventilation improvements in the solids and grit building, upgrade pump and wet well at the Lee Road Pump Station. We're recoding a number of tanks at Northwest Quadrant facility. So those, and replacing an odor fan as well. Those are a list of specific projects that we intend to accomplish in the coming year.
Thank you. And just a quick note through you, Mr. Chairman. I did have to use my Merriam-Webster to figure out what the heck appurtenant meant. And you might think about simplifying the language for futures. I happen to have one available at the time I was reading it. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Any other discussion? Seeing all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0381, increase and improvement of facilities in the Gates Chile Ogden Sewer District, general collection system improvements, and authorize an appropriation transfer.
Second.
Moved by legislator John, seconded by legislator Florio. Is there any discussion on this item? Legislator Hebert.
Yeah, one quick question, Mr. Chairman, through you to the administration. There are 4 very similar sewage projects. And is there a reason that this one and only this one uses the term appropriate transfer, while all of the others use interfund transfers? I don't understand the difference, if there is one.
So, Mr. Chairman, actually made a mistake last year on these referrals and incorrectly called these appropriation transfers. Thought we got them all corrected this year, but there was one referral we missed. The resolution will reflect interfund transfer.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0383, increase and improvement of facilities in the Rochester Pure Waters District, general collection system and treatment plant improvements, and authorize an interfund transfer.
Moved by legislator DeFlorio, second by legislator Huber. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0385, increase and improvement of facilities in the Arundecoit Bay South Central Pure Waters District, general pump station and interceptor improvements, and authorize an interfund transfer.
Moved by legislator John, second by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this item? Legislator Hebert.
Very quick question, Mr. Chairman of the administration. Is this entire referral related to the Sandbar Park project in Webster?
Through Mr. Chairman, no, this is related to general improvements within the Arundecoit Bay South Central Pure Waters District for, pump station work and the collection system.
Thank you. And through you, a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. Then is this being worked in conjunction with the Sandbar Park project? Because it's pretty similar to other things they're doing in that area.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there's another referral. The next referral relates to that specific project. But this particular project that we're discussing now is really for general pump station improvements work. It could potentially involve some work at the Sandbar pump station itself, but that'd be mechanical work, but nothing to do with this, the flood wall.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to note for the committee that it's actually a requirement of the State Comptroller's Office that when we have referrals for increase in improvements for a particular district, we have to reference all the projects in the I&I process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the floor.
Our discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0387, increase and improvement of facilities in the Arundecoit Bay South Central Pure Waters District, Lake Ontario Resiliency and Economic Development Initiative, Sandbar WWPS project, and amend the 2023 capital budget and bond resolution 125 of 2020 to provide an increase in funding.
Moved by legislator John, second by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this? Legislator Hubert.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, Mr. Chair, does the $245,000 for Sandbar Park portion represent cost overruns or inflation or something else?
Through Mr. Chairman, this, I would say, reflects all the above. What we had a very, very low estimate when this was developed, well before the design was done. And as you might recall, the READY projects came about with a real sense of urgency following the significant lake levels. So the county didn't prepare the estimate for the flood wall itself, but that was back even before we had a design. It was truly a concept. So in large part, it was underestimated, but we do know cost of inflation and materials have increased, contributed to the cost as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sat on the READY Commission local team, so I do recall. I yield the floor.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0389, amend the 2023-2028 capital improvement program and 2023 capital budget to add a project entitled Monroe Community College Finger Lakes Workforce Development Center Lobby Project and authorize financing for the project.
Moved by legislator John, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this? Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through to the administration. If the project goes over the $500,000 listed, will MCC still reimburse the county in full, or will we be on the hook for that difference?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to note that if the project were to exceed $500,000, we would have to come back to this body for permission to increase that cost. I realize a portion of this project is funded through private grantor agencies such as Bank of America. if the project were to exceed, we would also file an application with SUNY so that they would increase their contribution. So the intent is not to have Monroe County on the hook for $1 of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the floor.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0414, amend the 2022-2027 capital improvement program to advance the rehabilitate taxiway C1 between runway 422 and runway 1028 thresholds project at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport from 2024 to 2022. Amend the 2020 capital budget and bond resolution 57 of 2020 to provide an increase in funding and authorize a contract with CHA Consulting for design services for the project.
Moved by legislator John, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion? Legislator Hebert.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a simple question through you to the administration. Was there an RFP for the consulting contract?
Through the chair, yes, this body authorized a resolution back in 2020. I think it was resolution 320, authorizing the use of one of 3 engineering firms for airport-related AIP work and PFC work.
And through you, Mr. Chair, that implies all 3 gave you some sort of proposal to do this work, and you select, and these were the best.
Correct. There's an internal process that we review each of the engineering firms that this body has approved, and we decide CHA was the best to do this particular project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0418, authorized contracts with Steve General Contractors, Connors Haas, Bell Mechanical Contractors, and Michael A. Baraglio Plumbing and Heating for the City Place Space Utilization Project.
Second.
Second by, moved by legislator John, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion? Legislator Hebert.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, are there any other projects planned for City Place? I believe this is at least the 3rd one we've had brought to us since its original purchase.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we do have one additional capital project that was separate in the CIP for mechanical and electrical improvements for HVAC and backup power support within City Place.
Follow-up question through you, Mr. Chair, to the administration. The fact that there's only one in the CIP, which I looked up today, doesn't give me a lot of comfort because we've had a number of changes to the CIP over the last several months, almost on a monthly basis, where we add something to the CIP that wasn't in the CIP. So I'm trying to see if there's any other known projects coming that will, because we don't really update the CIP documentation online, and our constituents have no way of knowing what we actually have in our capital plan when you, at least nothing readily available without doing some sort of digging. And I guess I include myself as a constituent when I say that.
Mr. Chairman, we have no other projects presently that we're contemplating outside of the CIP. And this project, as you might recall, is one that's come before your honorable body for design and capital fund approvals for the City Place space utilization. The big project.
The reason I asked through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration is, it seems like we've done one for the 1st and 2nd floors under the Donalfo administration. I can't remember what it was called, but it was to move the planning department down there. Then we did one for the 7th and 8th floors and part of the 5th floor, if I'm remembering correctly. And when I read this one, I don't hear all the floors talked about yet. So I suspect something's in the works that we don't know about. I'd like you to either tell me I'm just nuts or that, in fact, there is something coming.
Don't tell him that.
You can tell me I'm nuts. It won't be the first.
Through Mr. Chairman, yeah. this project is for the 8th floor, 7th floor, 3rd and 5th floor, as well as the basement, the one that you referred to. This is the large capital project that I know generated a lot of discussion within these chambers. We do have a general improvements capital fund. You'll see that in the CIP. That's just expected for ongoing work. We had another project that's a city place, electrical and mechanical improvements, that appears in 2023 at 1.6 million. Again, that's a project that's been contemplated for some time. But this is the very substantial project, thank you, that we've discussed here and scoped out, and I'm pleased to say we're on time and under budget.
One last follow-up question. So our county workers that are on the floors that we haven't discussed, which I think are 4 and 6 mainly, are in the environments they're going to remain in. Is that basically correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we are going to be replacing some carpeting on floors that are not being thoroughly renovated. But again, we'll be making accommodations, full gut and rehab on the 8th floor, significant renovations on the 7th floor. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, through you, Mr. I guess I'd like a firmer statement saying that there's not something coming in the next year on 4th and 6th floor massive renovations for another X million dollars.
Through Mr. Chairman, there are no planned projects for renovations as you described, and no other substantial capital projects other than what's in the CIP planned.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Sorry to be a pain. I yield the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 22-0419, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for 1850 Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road, Rochester, New York, 14623.
Moved by legislator John, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion on this? Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the administration, is it correct to say the net of this referral is that the county owes the providers a little over $1.4 million more as a result of their consolidated financial reports that were provided?
Through the chair, could you please clarify your question?
I don't know if I can, but I guess I'm having trouble, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm having trouble discerning the impact of this referral on our expenses. I clearly am not a CFO type, but nor am I skilled enough to be one. But as I've gone through this, my calculations show that, at least I believe from the numbers that were provided in the attachments to the referral, that we end up owing a little over $1.4 million more. And I'd just like to know if this in fact affects our expenses or doesn't, because it certainly isn't called out that way. So it's likely my mistake, but please tell me it is or isn't.
Through the chair, just to clarify, are we on referral 22-0419?
Well, I thought we were.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, actually, 420 is, I think, is where we got 19 and 20. One's a secret and the other is the actual referral through you, Mr. Chairman.
Should I?
And if you need to take a look at it, get back to me, that's okay. like right at the beginning.
Through the chair, as it relates to 22-0419, the reason the county is conducting seeker at this time is New York State Office of Addiction Services awarded funds to Monroe County to then award to an outpatient treatment facility located at 1850 Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road in the amount of $446,110. In order to then undertake, fund, or approve an action, the county is required to undertake seeker. And that is what this referral is doing, is determining the potential significance for the funding of the outpatient treatment at 1850 Brighton Henrietta Town Line Road.
And I do apologize, Mr. Chairman, because I was referring to 420, not 19, but they're the same and I wrote them down as the same and screwed up. Not for the first time. I yield. I'm done.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee this evening? Seeing none, there are no other matters. The November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Environmental Public Works Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Environmental Public Works Committee is scheduled for Monday, December 19th, 2022 at 5:15. Thank you, everyone.